Good morning, all. Brian S. Pratt here. Going to read chapter 22 of Shepherd's Quest, book 1 of the Broken Key Trilogy. A quick recap. Bart, Ryan, Chad, and now Kevik are exploring this hidden area beneath the ruins of Algoth. They had that spectral battle. The Lord escaped this way, the ghostly Lord. And now they're down there trying to figure out if the key's down there, whatever's treasure is. And I like this area because it let me explore the whole traps and thieving things into greater detail and throw a little bit of theory and philosophy behind why things are the way they are. And if you've been following me for any length of time, you know that I'm very much into the whys, and it has to be logical. It can't just be there for a reason. There has to be it can't be there for no reason. There has to be a logical reason why things are the way they are. Other than, well, this is pretty cool for the characters to go through. I like the logic behind it. Anyway, here's chapter 22. After they finished eating and everyone had rested, Bart explained to the others he planned to go and look at the room where the water had come from. And if you remember, they had just encountered a water trap that almost killed them all. Kevik's quick thinking with his goo spell adhered them to the side of this vertical shaft that him, Ryan, and Chad were plummeting down, and Bart got them out of it. So Bart now wants to go look at it. He told them to wait on this side of the pit until he returned, because they're on the far side of the pit. I don't know if I made that clear, but they're on the far side of the pit, because there's the door area, pit, and then they're on the far side of the pit. Taking the lantern from Chad, he jumped to the pit's other side and walked to the room. Behind him, the glow from Kevik's bobbing light appeared. There was still a trickle of water making its way down the passage from the room. He walked through the door into a large room. The light from the lantern failed to reach its uppermost reaches. In a couple areas, there were steady trickles of water coming from the dark heights above. All but one of the trickles made their way down the sides of the room. The other one, however, fell freely and splashed on the floor. He inspected the door and the frame. He discovered how once a door was shut, it would create a tight seal with a door jamb. This would allow the water trickling down to fill the room for the next intruder. He admired the work that must have gone into putting this particular trap into effect. After a quick search to make sure there was no other exit, he left the room and made his way back to the others. He left the door open so the water could escape. That was a pretty clever trap, he told the others upon his return. Hopping over the pit, he saw they were ready to continue the exploration. Clever enough to almost get us killed, Ryan said. I know, replied Bart with a grin. Impressive. He headed back the way they had come, with the others following along behind. They started a systematic search of what they'd begun to call the labyrinth. They called it that because of the many turns and branching passages. Every time they would come to a junction, the first thing they checked for was the presence of copper coins. If some were present, they would take the passage that didn't have any as yet. Each time they crossed through the junction, they would add a coin. So, if they came to one that they had already gone through, there would be two passages marked with coins. One passage would be marked with one coin, which would indicate from which direction they had originally entered the intersection. There would also be a two-coin passage indicating the direction they had gone the first time. Then, when they took a third way, they would set 3 coins down, and then 4 if they happened to pass through a junction with 4 ways to go where possible. Their search led them down one passage after another. Truly, this place deserved the name Labyrinth. Finally, they came to a room at the end of one of the smaller branching passages. It had 2 chests sitting across from each other at either end of the room. Stay out in the hallway, Bart said to the others as he made it into the room. Carrying the lantern, he moved slowly and carefully to the chest on the right. Be careful, offered Kevik. Don't plan to be otherwise, replied Bart. I've often thought about that whole be careful. You know, everyone is always says, be careful, be careful. You know, on the way home, my girlfriend says, be careful. Does that make you be more careful? No. No, it doesn't. And for a long time, I started to realize that for some reason, someone saying that to me annoyed me. And for the longest time, I would get really annoyed by it, and I would reply, "Well, do you think I'm going to be I'm not going to be careful?" Or I say, "Well, I'll be careful this time just for you because you said it." But all it really means is that they care about you. That's all it means. It has, and they know you're going to be careful. But it's just a way of people say, let another person know that they care about and what happens to it. He worked his way closer to the chest and stopped 5 feet away. The memory of the last time when the floor opened up was still vivid in his mind. Taking his pack, which still had the rope tied to it, he began tossing it onto the floor in front of the chest. After a couple tosses that resulted in no reaction, he tried the area next to the chest, and then finally began hitting the chest itself. Still, nothing happened. "Maybe this one doesn't have a trap," suggested Chad. "I wouldn't bet on it," Bart replied. "We've come across others before that failed to go off," said Riyan. "Maybe it's the same thing here." "That might be," nodded Bart. He set the lantern on the floor so the light shone upon the face of the keyhole. Then he took small steps toward the chest. The face of the chest was nondescript. It looked like all the others. He checked near the keyhole for any markings that the chest maker might have put there to indicate a trap was present, but it was clear. Now, you get to thinking about earlier. I said how chest makers put markings near the keyhole to indicate a trap. Well, not everyone would always put it there. Certain people probably would. Others would think, well, since everyone else does it, I'm going to put mine elsewhere and maybe work it into the design so that a thief can't tell. So sometimes there won't be one. He thought to himself that this chest might actually be safe. After removing his 2 picks, he knelt before the lock and set to working on it. As he worked, he took his time, and finally the lock clicked open. Breathing a sigh of relief, he replaced the picks back in the rolled leather and put it in his shirt. Bracing himself, he lifted the lid. Again, nothing happened. Inside, he found a small book with red bindings centered in the bottom of the chest. He turned his head toward the others waited and said, "There's a book in here." He reached inside to pick it up. Just as his fingers touched it, Kevik said, "Are there any markings on it?" That question may have saved him from being blinded. He turned his head toward Kevik to reply as he lifted the book from the bottom. He said, "No, there isn't." Then a spray of liquid shot from the back of the side of the chest and hit him in the side of the head just behind the ear. When the liquid struck, he cried out and jumped backwards. "Bart!" exclaimed Ryan as he rushed forward. The smell of smoldering hair permeated the room. He quickly got his water bottle and began pouring it over the affected area. When the last drop was poured, Bart's hair in that area looked singed. The skin was a bit red underneath, and the top of his ear sported a blister. But other than that, there was nothing serious. "If that had hit your face," Chad began, "it would have blinded me," replied Chart. He felt the affected area and then allowed Ryan to inspect it. "I think you'll survive," Ryan told him. "It doesn't look as if anything permanent was done." "Thank goodness." He held up the book that was in the chest. Kevin came closer and took the book. "It doesn't look magical," he stated. He looked it over, gave the front and back careful consideration, but didn't open it. "Aren't you going to open it?" Bart asked. "Not yet," he replied. Then suddenly the book began to glow blue, telling the others that he was casting his identification spell. The others waited until the glow faded, and then looked at him expectantly. A grin came over him as he stared at the book. "What?" asked Ryan. He glanced up at them and said, "There are 2 spells within this book. Both are new to me." "Can you use them?" Chad asked. "Perhaps," he said. "I will need to study them for some time, but first I'm going to copy them into my spellbook." "Not right this second, though," Ryan said. He shook his head. "No, I'll do it when I'm not otherwise occupied." Opening his pack, he placed the book inside with 2 spell books already there. For those my age, do you remember playing Bard's Tale? How, I think it was Bard's Tale. Maybe Thieves' World? No, not Thieves' World. I'll just say Bard's Tale. Anyway, remember how when the mages cast a spell, they had to rest and then they would get them back? That always bugged me. Because if you know a spell, you should be able to use it over and over until your well of energy is expended. Like now, you know, in like Skyrim, you can cast spells all you want to repeatedly. But back in Bard's Tale, you had to rest. Didn't matter how long you rest. You could rest for 1 hour, so you had to rest, and then you could do your spells again. That always bugged me. That's why Kevin can use his goose spells as often as he wants to. He shook his head. No, I'll do it when I'm not otherwise occupied. Opening his pack, he placed the book inside with the 2 spell books already there. The 2 spell books, of course, first was his own spell book with his limited spells, and his master spell book that has, I'm sure, awesome spells in it. But being the level he is, he doesn't have the skill to open his masters because you know, a magic user who is as powerful as his master was, the spell book would be secured in some way from anyone opening it and learning the spells inside. So, and he has to grow in mastery of magic before he can safely open it. Still, one more chest, Bart said as Ryan gave him a hand up. As he turned and began using his pack tied to the rope to test for pits, or for pit traps, I should say. For pit traps, yeah. For pit traps, you overheard Chad asking Ryan, why would they put such a thing here? He meant the little book. To encourage thieves to keep pressing their luck, Bart replied for Ryan. He tossed the pack and pulled it back only to toss it yet again. If you had something of extreme value, say the key we're looking for, you would want to kill off any thief that found their way in here before he got to it, right? Absolutely, replied Kelly. Better to lose less valuable items. Correct, Bart said as he threw the pack again. Now, the best thing that could happen is for the thief to die before he ever reached the treasure you're trying to keep hidden. That's what this place is designed for. A thief would hardly continue to trip the various traps you have spent such time in constructing if every time he opened a chest, there was nothing in it. You have to put the carrot before the mule if you want the mule to walk in the quicksand. He grinned. That's a saying my father used to use. Finished with testing the area with the rope and pack, he tossed it over to the others and worked his way carefully toward the other chest. That's why it's worthwhile to open each chest we come to. But at the same time, you risk injury and death, argued Ryan. Bart paused and glanced back to him. He shrugged, then said, such is the life of a thief. Turning back to the chest, he resumed his slow, methodical process. Think on this, too. If the thief was to find enough of the smaller treasure, he might feel the risk no longer worth it and leave. After all, he paused a moment as he concentrated on the floor before him. Not finding anything, he took another step. If someone has a wherewithal to build a complex like this, he surely can afford to lose a few trinkets here and there. I think I get what you're trying to say, Ryan said. Good, Bart replied. He finally right at the side of the chest. Could you move the lantern closer for me? He said to Chad. Sure, Chad said. He then went and picked up the lantern and set it down where Bart indicated. After it was on the floor, he returned to where the others watched. Bart knelt before the chest and ran his fingers lightly along the front. I don't think so, they heard him mumble to himself. He took out 2 picks again, only this time he didn't remove the 2 he used to use. These were slightly longer with elongated flat heads. He placed the head of one into the seam on the right side of the chest between the front and the edge binding, then did the same with the other on the left side of the front. Slowly, he worked the 2 tools into the seams. When the 2 heads were completely inserted within the seams, he pried the front cover. Only after only a moment of effort, the front side of the chest popped open to reveal a handful of gems glittered inside. Bart glanced back to the others and grinned. The top is a fake, he explained. No matter how much you work at it, there's no way to open it. In fact, he paused while he pointed to the keyhole. If he were to try to pick the lock, that would trigger the trap. Reaching in, he removed the gems and handed them to Riyan, who put them in his pack. He replaced his tools back with his other picks and slid the rolled leather inside his shirt. Standing up, he indicated the passage leading from the room and said, "Shall we?" Bart led the way again as they resumed their explorations. After a search down a dead-end loop, they turned back and followed another of the main passages, one they hadn't been down before. Not too long after they entered that passage, another smaller one branched off to the right. Thus far, the smaller one seemed to have yielded treasure of one kind or another. Turning into it, they followed it down and it turned to the left. There it came to an end, 10 feet past the turn. The light from the lantern glittered off of a pile of coins and jewels sitting in the middle of the floor at the end of the passage. "If that isn't a blatant declaration of a trap being present, I don't know what is," Bart said as he glanced at the others. "Are you going to try and get it?" Riyan asked. Bart glanced back at him and nodded. "We could use the money. Stay here." Turning back to face the treasure, he used his pack on the rope to test for pitfalls. When none had been triggered, he set the pack down and slowly moved forward. Everything his father ever said to him screamed that this was a trap. No one ever left treasure lying out in the open like this unless it was being used as a lure. Whoever built this place had so far used vastly different, ingenious traps for every circumstance. He still couldn't believe that water one. Whoever had devised it certainly deserved a bonus. He stopped when he was 3 feet from the pile. Holding up the lantern, he scanned the walls but didn't find anything unusual. The area of the floor around the treasure appeared as it should, which only made him all the more nervous. Something had to trigger something. It had to. Crouching down, he ran his hand over the surface of the floor between himself and the treasure. After a minute of careful examination, he found nothing out of the ordinary. He crept forward a little farther, close enough for him to actually be able to touch the treasure. He removed his belt knife, not the new one, but the older knife he'd had for years, and moved its tip toward the edge of the pile. "Find anything?" Chad suddenly hollered to him. Chad's question startled him, and the knife point accidentally dislodged 3 of the coins from the pile. He froze as he expected something nasty to develop, but nothing did. Turning back to Chad with an angry expression, he said, "Keep quiet." With a guilty look upon his face, Chad replied quietly, "Sorry." Bart took a deep, calming breath, then returned his attention back to the pile. The 3 coins that had fallen laid next to the pile, and he picked them up. They were regular gold coins similar to those they had found earlier. He placed them in his belt pouch before moving his knife back toward the pile. It was entirely possible that one of the coins or gems could in some way be the trigger. You move one and the trap would be triggered. It took a rather special type of triggering mechanism to use an item so small, but he heard tales of it being done. He slid the point of the knife carefully beneath the coin. When enough of the blade was beneath it, he lifted the coin very slowly from the pile. Once it was free and nothing happened, he put the coin in his pouch. Then one by one, he repeated the process and put the liberated coins and gems into his belt pouch. After 10 minutes of this, the others realized that he was going to take a while and made themselves comfortable against the wall of the passage where it made the turn. Bart's back was beginning to ache by the time there were only 7 coins and 3 gems left in place. He was amazed he had made it this far without anything happening. It was possible, though, that whatever trap had been put into place could have become deactivated over time. That does happen. Moving his knife forward once more, he went for the largest of the 3 remaining gems and slid his knife point beneath it. Before the tip had even reached halfway beneath the gem, it met resistance. Bart couldn't help himself but grin. There was a trap, and it would be triggered by the removal of this gem. Unfortunately, the gem happened to be the largest one of the pile, and therefore worth a lot of coins. Well, that would make sense for it to be a trap, right? The largest one, because everyone would go for the largest one. 2 of the remaining coins were positioned beneath the gem, the rest were not. He quickly picked up all the remaining coins and gems but the 2 that were under the trapped gem. Glancing back at the others, he said, I found the trap. Can you disarm it? Asked Riyan. I'm not sure, he replied. Then he indicated the sizable gem that remained on the floor. It's attached to that one, he said. If you were to take the gem up off the floor, it would pull the cord it's attached to, and that would set off the trap. Can you cut it? Asked Kevik. Often traps such as these will go off if it's cut, he explained. It might be a good idea if you three were to go back and wait out in the main passage until I'm done. Just leave if you think it's too risky, Riyan told him. It's not worth your life. He'd already considered that. Unfortunately, there was that little matter. Yeah. There was that little matter of a death mark hanging over him. He would need all the coins he could get in order to have it removed. He seriously needed that gem. Plus, he hated to walk away from a challenge. I'll be okay, he said. You just wait for me there. All right. If you're sure. When he received Bart's nod, he and the others left the smaller passage and returned to the main one. Kevik's bobbing sphere appeared to give them light, while Bart retained the lantern. Once they were gone, Bart unrolled the leather pack containing his lockpicks. For this, he would need a more sophisticated tool than the ones he'd been using. Another invention of his father. He removed a 3-inch tool. In the middle of the tool was what his father called a vice grip. It was designed for situations such as this. You place the cord or whatever is in the vice grip like this, and then, provided it was thin and narrow like a string within the vice grip. Then you tighten the grip until the trigger was held securely. After that, you'd be able to cut what you were after from the trigger safely. No, I got to move. Yeah. After that, you would be able to safely cut what you were after from the trigger. The first thing he did was to very carefully move the 2 coins beneath the gem ever so slightly away from each other. He needed a gap between them wide enough through which to slip the tool. Once he had the space, he got down on his belly and very gently maneuvered the tool beneath the gem between the 2 coins. When he felt it was in the correct position, he gradually worked the tool sideways until he felt the triggering cord slip into the vise. Then ever so carefully, he turned the screw at the end of the pick and closed the vise on the cord. He had to be careful, for the cord was incredibly old and was likely to break under the slightest pressure. As soon as the screw was turned as far as it could go, he took out another of the tools. This one was a 5-inch narrow rod with a blade shielded by a small piece of hardened leather on the end. This was actually the first time he had ever had occasion to use this particular instrument. His father had said that when he came up with this one, he ruined many a pick case before he learned to put a cover over the blade. After removing its cover, he slid the rod under the gem next to the pick holding the cord. Then he began cutting the cord above the pick holding it. Very slowly, one strand of the cord at a time, he sawed through it. When he felt the tool cut the last strand, he braced himself, but nothing happened. He lifted the gem and saw that his pick held the cord securely between its vices. Flipping the gem over, he discovered the cord had been attached to the bottom of the gem by a small metal staple. The holes that the ends of the staple made in the gem would lower its overall value. However, a creative jeweler could set it in a necklace or other ornamental item where the back would be covered by something else. After that, only an expert jeweler would be able to tell. Quite happy with himself, he pocketed the other 2 coins that the gem had been resting upon. His knife pick he replaced back with the others. That only left the vice pick. He did not want to leave without it. With the way things were, he may never see another one again. But if he moved it from the cord, it would trigger the trap. You okay in there? Riyan's voice came to him from the passage. Okay, that was actually a foreshadowing, though I don't think anyone probably caught it and dismissed it, possible spoilers. With the way things were. Okay. I've alluded to a power struggle that Bart was on the wrong side of. And so I'm not sure if anyone picked that up or not. And there's a death mark on him. His father gave him these tools, and now it says with the way things were, he might not get another one again. Well, he got the tools from his father. And with the way things were, he might not get another one again. So that means with the way things were, he might not get another one again from his father. So I don't know if anyone ever caught that. You okay in there? Ryan's voice came to him from the passage. Yeah, he hollered back. Be just a minute. All right, came the reply. Hurry up. Kevik's bobbing light is beginning to drive me crazy. Bart grinned. He, too, found the constantly bobbing light annoying. Why anyone would create a spell like that was beyond him. Then he returned to the problem in hand, the vice pick. Coming up with an idea, he pulled out a long string he had in the bottom of his pack. Then he secured one end of the string around the screw at the end of the vice pick. After that, he picked up his pack on a rope and the lantern, then walked backwards to the other passage. As he went, he played out the string until finally arriving at the main passage with the others. What's that for? Chad asked when he saw the string. I'm recovering a tool, he explained, but it's going to trigger the trap when I do. So you got the gem? Ryan asked. Bart patted his belt pouch and nodded. Now all I need to do is get my tool back. He took the end of the string in hand and gently pulled on it. The last thing he wanted was for the string attached to the screw to come off or break. Then suddenly, the strain that had been building on the string was gone. He could hear the metallic clinking of the tool as it bounced along the floor of the passage. Bart! Ryan hollered. The ceiling is coming down. He looked above him and saw where a stone block, the width of the smaller passage opening, was falling at him. Jumping back out of the way, he quickly pulled the string. The tool bounced along the passage as it headed for the rapidly closing opening. Then just before the stone settled to the floor, the tool emerged from beneath the falling stone. With a thump, the stone settled against the floor, completely blocking the mouth of the passage. That was close, commented Kevik. I would hate to have been in there when that stone began to fall, observed Chad. Me too, agreed Bart. Untying the string from the screw, he put the string back in his pack and the vice pick in his rolled leather containing his lockpicks. After that, he distributed the coins and gems to the others. He kept the largest gem, the one that the trigger had been attached to, for himself. Need a break? Asked Ryan. Bart shook his head. No, let's keep going. The sooner we're done with this, the better. Taking the lantern, he stepped out, and once again they began combing the passages for the key. They didn't come across anything other than more crisscrossing passages and dead ends. Neither treasure nor rooms, just passages. After a while, they returned to areas they had already been to, and even with the coins placed on the ground at the junctions, they began to get turned around. Finally, they came to the end of a passage with a door. Man, if this isn't it, I say we call it a day, Ryan said. The past hour of wandering through the passages had left him tired and discouraged. I think there is still one more area off that way, Bart said, pointing behind them and to the left, that we haven't been to yet. We passed by a passage with no coins on the way here. Okay, fine, Ryan replied. Check here and back there, then we call it a day. Agreed, said Bart. In fact, he was becoming rather tired as well. Sighing, he said, stay here, then went to the door. He went forward to do his pack on a rope trick again. But same as the last dozen times, he failed to find anything. Of course, he knew that the one time he didn't do it would be the time he would run afoul of one. Moving to the door, he grew cautious as he recalled the water behind that previous one that he had opened. It had nearly killed him. He glanced behind to caution the others to back away, but they had already done so. I guess they were learning. Then he examined the walls leading away from the door and saw how they, too, held... Turning back to the door, he approached and noticed how there were specks of soot on the door and the surrounding walls. Fire? How would there have been a fire here? Unless the trap somehow dealt with fire? Then he examined the walls leading away from the door and saw how they, too, held evidence that fire once raged through there. The specks of soot finally ended 20 feet away from the door. What is it? Ryan asked. They had been watching him closely, examining the walls. Soot, he replied. Glancing down at them, he said, this whole end of the passage shows signs of fire. Fire? Asked Chad. How is that possible? I'm not sure, he replied. Better leave that door alone then, suggested Ryan. No sense in risking it. But then Bart's suspicious nature kicked in. What if this area had been treated like this in order to convince a thief not to try the door? After all the other traps a thief would have to have come across by this time, the thief would be getting rather paranoid about a stone passage with soot lining the end. He had almost walked away from it himself. He turned back to Ryan and said, "I'm going to open the door." "Are you crazy?" Ryan asked incredulously. "It's not worth it. We could always come back if there was no other way." But Bart was already moving back to the door as he ignored Ryan. He checked the door again and found it locked. The lock was rather complicated, more complicated in fact than most locks he had come across down there. Despite its complexity, he had it open in just a few minutes. After putting the lockpicks away, he took the handle of the door and opened it. The smell of lantern oil hit him a split second before gallons of lantern oil poured through the door and engulfed him. Kevik was the first to realize what was happening, and only his quick reflexes saved Bart from a horrible death. In the blink of an eye, he cast his goo spell and completely encased the lantern where it sat a few feet behind Bart. When the oil hit the lantern, the goo kept it upright and airtight. Otherwise, the burning wick in their lantern would have ignited the oil, flowing out from the door into a fireball. A string of expletives erupted from Bart at his own stupidity. The signs were there, he had just misinterpreted them. Now his clothing was soaked with lantern oil, and the fumes were making him cough. He turned around and saw the others staring at him. They had backed up quite a bit to avoid coming into contact with the oil. "Don't say anything," he said. Ryan shrugged. "I'm just glad Kevik reacted as fast as he did. I didn't even realize what was happening before he had already cast his spell." Kevik grinned. "You have to react fast when you're a magic user. Slow magic users tend not to survive very long." Bart nodded. "I see that." He glanced to the goo-coated lantern. The light coming from the burning wick within cast a green pall to the passage as it made its way through the goo. "I think you can get rid of that now," he told Kevik. "Are you sure?" Kevik asked. "Fumes are still present that might be ignited." Bart glanced to the lantern and could see the flame was dying out from lack of oxygen anyway. "Fine," he said. "Wait until the flame dies out." Bart then heard Ryan groan as Kevik's bobbing sphere appeared to give them light. "Is there some other spell you could use?" Ryan asked. "Sorry," he replied. "This was the only spell I've learned. At the time, I thought having a light like this would be pretty neat." "Seeing as how you're the only one with a light," Bart said to Kevik, "how about checking out that room?" He indicated the room where the oil poured out. "Don't worry," he added when he saw Kevik grow nervous. "I'll come with you." "All right," Kevik agreed and began walking forward. Ryan and Chad accompanied him. The oil fumes were very strong, and they covered their nose and mouths with cloth to avoid breathing the worst of it. Inside, they found that it wasn't really all that large, merely 5 feet square and 10 feet high. A small round opening in the ceiling must be where they would pour in the lantern oil after resetting the trap. "Pretty effective," Bart commented as they left. "Open the door, and the oil would be ignited by whatever source of light the thief had on him." "Unless he had an annoying bobbing light," Ryan said dryly. Bart chuckled. By the time the flame in the lantern had died out and Kevik dispelled the goo spell, by this time the flame in the lantern had died out and Kevik dispelled the goo spell. He picked it up the lantern. He picked up the lantern and carried it with him as they left the oil-coated passage. When they made it back to the junction of passages, they came to a stop. "I need to get this washed out," Bart said, indicating his oil-soaked clothes. "My eyes are beginning to sting from the fumes." "What about that last area we have yet to check?" Ryan asked. "Do it tomorrow," he said. "There's no way I can work traps and such as I am now." "All right, back to the surface." In order to better find the area where they still needed to search, at every junction they came to, he took the coins that had been placed there and marked their passage and formed them into arrows pointing the way back to the unexplored area. Because except for that one spot, all the areas apparently they've already been through, and there are coins at every entrance. So they just take all the coins and put them into an arrow. So when they get there, they just head in one direction. Makes it easy. It took some time doing, but they finally found the stairs leading back up to the kitchen. "It's still light out," exclaimed Chad. "I thought we had been down there longer." They went to a nearby window and looked out. From the position of the sun, it looked like they still had a couple more hours of daylight remaining. Leaving the kitchen behind, they made their way back to the hall where they found their horses safe and sound. Bart went outside into the small pool where they watered the horses and began to strip. He was quickly naked and used dirt to work the lantern oil out of his clothes. When the others showed up and saw what he was doing, he said, "Better dirty clothes than ones full of lantern oil." "But you fouled the water," complained Kevin. "What are we and the horses supposed to drink now?" Giving him an irritated look, Bart said, "I'm sure there are other places around here. Go find one." "Come on," Riyan said, and then he and the others took the horses in search of water. As they left Bart behind, they heard a splash as he entered the water and began scrubbing the oil out of his hair and off of his skin. And that's it for chapter 22. I love this chapter in this section because I get to explore thieving skills and some theory behind why things are the way they are, like the coins in the middle of the hallway. Why would people leave it there? But when I finally realized it was to lure thieves, kill them off before they found the real treasure, that made sense. And that's totally logical. I totally should see someone doing that. Because if a thief there to steal treasure, he's greedy and he'll want that treasure. And I guess stupid thieves don't last very long. Thieves with low intelligence don't last very long. Anyway, that ends chapter 22. And I'll do chapter 23 tomorrow. It's Sunday, so day of relaxation, and it's going to be nice out. Sunny today. And I'm still working on the 4th book of Travail, having issues with I've got like a lot of things in motion, and they all have to meet in one spot at one point. And getting those timelines worked out is challenging. Plus, a couple of the battles that have happened in the middle of this is different. Plus, as you know, James is elsewhere. so I got to get that worked out. I'm pretty sure you know he's on another world. If you don't, well, I just spoiled that for you. But he is. So I got to get him back. But and make it logical, right? Make it logical. Make it interesting. Make it fun. It's got to be logical. It can't. I just can't have there's a magic glowing door, and he walks through it. Boop. And he's there. Right. I can't do that. And it's progressing slowly. I miss the days of the Morsite saga, when basically it just followed him and just him. I like that. It was a lot easier to write, but I like all the different people and the different storylines going on. So I like that too. And it's not the storylines. They're not boring. I don't think they're boring storylines. I try to make them interesting, not just fillers to make my book longer. Some authors do that, and I try not to. Some things you have to do, but I try not to. I try to keep them interesting. Well, I probably better wrap this up. You all have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.